What are some of the reasons why Detroit became so rich? Yes?
Because it had more cars and
Cars. Good. Cars.
more money that made more jobs, which made more money.
Good. Jobs. And money. So when Detroit was at its peak, like back in the 50s and 60s, what could you say about it that was an accomplishment? This table?
Cars, lots of cars.
What did they call Detroit? Do you remember its nickname?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Motor City.
Motor City. So it was so famous, it became the Motor City.
At the towards the end,
Uh-huh.
that building that had it was just the foundation. Was that the motor company thing?
Yeah, Ford Company building. Yes?
But whose downfall was comfort and overconfidence.
Right, good.
And other countries.
So maybe they started to get a little bit lazy because they were the best.
Japan.
Okay, foreign competition.
Japan.
Now what started coming into the U.S. as a result of this foreign competition?
Hey.
Cheaper cars. So what happened over here? What happened to Detroit? Yes?
There was less jobs.
Less jobs. Good.
Minimum wage.
But Detroit is still there. It's still just down the way. What kinds of things now when we think about Detroit? Something positive about a legacy. What do we think of? Yes?
I know how it's got a lot of crime in it.
Okay, but what about something positive? Something that, wow, Detroit's, yeah?
Trying to clean up all the graffiti.
Okay, what's something, so a legacy means something that we can say, Detroit made a good contribution. Yes?
They made automobiles that are still going on today.
Yep, they still make cars. Still a good place for cars. So the cars is a part of their legacy. Are any of you guys familiar with football? So they have football teams. What are their football teams?
Lions.
The Lions. I don't know if they'll be that proud of the Lions.
Tigers and Bears.
Lions, Tigers, and Bears. What about the music? Do you guys ever listen to music from Detroit, like Eminem?
Yeah, I hate him.
You don't like him? You like Eminem? Okay, so we'll say the music.
I like the candy M&Ms.
Okay. So now we're going to work in our small groups. If you can get at your tables, we're going to have 4 groups. Why don't you guys join this group here? So you'll have 3 here and 3 there. Alright, guys. Yep. So what we're going to look at, guys, pay attention. What we're going to look at now is this rise and fall cycle here we're talking about.
I know how Elvis died.
Rise and fall cycle when it comes to
I know how Elvis died.
celebrities, okay? Yeah, you guys want to do Elvis?
That's what he died.
So pay attention, guys. Ready? So we're going to have 4 groups. We're going to have a reader. You're going to read about your celebrity. A writer is going to write down stuff from this chart. And then brainstormers figure out ideas, okay? And then we're going to share it with the rest of the group. So, who here in this group likes Elvis? You guys, how about you guys? Tell us about Michael Jackson. What made him famous?
He had
Guys?
he had 18 #1 hits. He sold 100 million copies of Thriller. One of his, he was the king of pop, and some of the downfalls were he started hanging with some younger people, and that made him less popular, and they were getting suspicious.
Okay.
And he started having trouble to sleep.
He spent money and went into debt.
Yeah, he spent money and went into debt.
Okay, how is he remembered today? What's his legacy?
Oh, and I was going to say that he died from taking too much sleep medication
Okay.
at age 50.
Were you doing?
And some of the reasons why he's still famous today is his unique dance moves and his great voice.
Good. Okay, tell us all about Elvis Presley. Okay?
Okay, Factor in Christ, he was a singer, an actor, he had great charisma, he was the king of rock and roll, considered the greatest musician of the 20th century, and some of his downfall was weight, he was a drug addict, and poor health.
Okay, how is he remembered today?
His songs, music, movies, and his different kinds of music.
Good.
How did he die?
Drug addict.
All right, guys. So we're gonna look at some of these kind of factors of why people become famous and why they start to fall from grace as they relate to the Roman Empire. You guys ready?
Any person?
Okay, let's have a look. So now, first off, what are some of these countries here? What is this country?
Spain.
Spain? How about this one?
Portugal.
Portugal? How about this over here?
Egypt.
Egypt. How about this? Shaped like a boat.
Italy.
Italy? How about this one here?
Germany. Russia.
France. Germany.
How about this here?
England.
England. Okay. So look at all these countries that the Roman Empire included. What is this big sea here?
Mediterranean.
Mediterranean Sea.
Black Sea's up at the top, right?
So that is an
No, that's
awfully,
actually 3 C's put together.
awfully big area. So from what you guys have studied so far, how did the Roman Empire become so big? Yeah?
Taking over cities.
Okay. So conquering land.
I know, a really good one. I hate it.
Don't.
Okay, how else did it become so big? Yes?
It was strict.
Strict. So they have different rules and laws, like government.
I would have heard a lot longer if I wanted to.
Okay. Yes?
Wealth, power, and prosperity.
Good. So they have the money. What are some other reasons? Yes?
War.
Okay, so the military. How about one more reason?
Colosseum.
Yeah? Huh?
They're large buildings.
Buildings. So some of their technology, architecture. Good.
Better.
Building. Architecture. Buildings.
Can you stop, please?
Okay, so let's look at some of these reasons.
He's not afraid.
Okay, guys. So you guys talked about a strong military.
Yep.
Okay, so they were able to conquer these weaker militaries in all these areas here that weren't ready to handle this well-organized, well-funded Roman army that were able to easily conquer all these other militaries in here. So that's one of the reasons. Now, how do you get around this Mediterranean Sea? What do you guys think?
Boats.
Boats? So what happens? What happens when you meet pirates over here that try to take your boats?
You shoot them.
So what they did was they developed technology. Okay, planks, in order to get from their boats to the pirates' boats and take them over. Okay,
Enormous
this is similar to how Michael Jackson developed like the moonwalk and innovation. So they used innovation for their rise. In terms of this strength, how did Lance Armstrong get to be so good? You talked about his big heart. He's also very strong. So these are some similar reasons. Big strength and might. Innovation.
Because Pence did that to him.
Keeping people happy. So what did Elvis do? He entertained people, right?
Yeah.
So do you guys remember learning about in your class about like the gladiator games?
Yeah.
I've seen this
Also like check, yep.
It's the guy with the shield and midget.
A midget? No, this is a famous actor here. He's the gladiator.
Don't say midget.
He's just kind of crouching.
That is going to be his teacher.
So they invented games. They also had trade, so people were more well off than they were before. So they kept people happy. Also, technology. When you guys kind of mentioned on with the buildings, they also. So what are these called here?
Pillars.
Arches.
Those are called aqueducts.
Oh yeah, because the water pipes flow through them to get to the big
Yeah.
like
I was going to say that.
what's
Do
the
you
name
think
of
we
them?
still use this today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So I used to live in New York City, which has almost 30 million people in that area. Where do you suppose to get the water from for that many people? Yeah?
Ocean.
No?
Underground.
Underground? No?
the river. What's the name of the river?
New York City is made of islands, so the ocean has salt in it. Underground, it'll go right back to the ocean because it's an island. We actually bring the water from the upstate New York through these aqueducts from reservoirs of fresh water all the way down to New York City through these kind of aqueducts, which are actually underground. And so the water in New York City is very fresh and delicious because it comes from...
Like our water.
It is.
Like our water.
Yeah, it's just as good as our water because it comes from the mountains of upstate
Well,
New
the
York.
school's water
So they're
is, like,
still using
filtered
this
stuff,
technology.
but-
Now,
water comes from that tank up there. Yeah.
what kind of
Also, they have
advantage
that
do you
tank.
think they would have?
Big tank.
for building roads. Let's take a look back at this map here.
Which one?
Okay, so imagine you have, they were growing a lot of grains in here, but over here, let's say they really need those grains. How are you going to get those?
Trade or stealing.
Robbery.
What they did is they made an excellent system of roads throughout the whole empire to connect everything. They didn't have roads like that before. This is part of their technology that they were able to connect their entire empire through things like roads. Nowadays we take roads for granted. Back then they didn't really have them. Another thing that you guys mentioned about strict rules and things like that. What is this thing here called? It's called the Senate.
Oh.
We have one in our country now too. Okay, guys. What are the legislative bodies in our country? We have.
Judicial.
Okay.
Judicial boards.
Okay. What else? Legislative. What is the legislative composed of?
President.
The Senate and the House of Representatives, right? So we borrowed this idea of the Senate, right, guys?
Yeah.
You paying attention over here? What is this here? Let's turn this down. I don't need you looking at that right now. Thank you. Okay. So the various laws. Now, what currency do we use in the United States?
Cash.
We use American dollars, right? So what if like Drummond School decided they were going to start using a totally different kind of currency? Do you think that would be like bottle caps? Do you think that would make it more difficult?
Yes. No.
So back in this day, all these different areas had completely different currencies. Some had bottle caps, for instance. Some had, say, like acorns or something. The Romans made a common currency so that entire area, it was very easy to trade. Okay. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to hand this out to you. And we're going to look at, here we go. We're going to write down some of these reasons for the rise of the Roman Empire. So how do you suppose this big mighty empire came back down?
It got conquered.
Some of you think it got conquered, okay?
Well, by who?
Let's take a look. Overconfidence? Good. Okay, so what happened exactly?
They're thinking they're so powerful, and then another person.
Alright, so you see this area here? Oops, where's our blue?
Oh, they were conquered by Germany?
What is this area here?
I don't know.
You notice how it's a slightly different color? Why do you suppose that is?
A very unstable place.
They didn't conquer it.
Oh.
Guys, can you turn your seat around? Turn around, guys. I want you to be watching what's going on. We'll finish. We're working on that part right now.
Conquered them.
Yes?
So wait, since Germany is a different color, it looks like it's the one, the country above the UK. Is that a different color?
Yeah, so what that means is they were not able to completely conquer those areas
Oh, the top
because
of
they had
England,
a lot of tribes in here that fought the Roman army. They didn't have one single capital that they were able to conquer. So Germany was never controlled. Yeah?
Top of England, too, is...
Yeah, this area too had tribes here. They couldn't conquer those areas completely. Do you have a question? So what ended up happening, as you'll see in the next slide here,
the Russians ganged up.
all these people started to come to the south and conquering these lands. A German chieftain actually threw the last Roman emperor right off the throne and took on over. So this we call the migration. All these people started to come in, form their own little areas. They didn't want to obey the Roman rule. They wanted a place they could have their own. Maybe they wanted bottle caps for their currency. Maybe they wanted their own languages, their own cultures. They didn't want to have to pay taxes to the Roman Empire. So they started coming in numbers too big for the Romans to stop and forming their own areas. So what are we left with here?
Italy.
Basically Italy. This was, and the capital of Italy is Rome. So that's kind of all they were left with. after all these people started coming in. Now, what are some of the reasons that they got weak? Well, let's look at some analogies to our celebrities here. So just as our celebrities could not conquer their drug addictions, so they could not conquer this area here. Just as like Marilyn Monroe, she got divorced many times, all the changes in her life. Here, migration patterns represent the change that kind of caused the empire to shrink. Now, they also started to cheat a little bit, because instead of having their own military protect their own borders, they said, you guys do it. And they hired these barbaric tribes to say, why don't you guys down here guard the Roman Empire for us? But do you think those tribes stayed loyal to the Roman Empire? No. Eventually they turned on them. At that point, these areas kind of became controlled by those barbaric tribes. So this is kind of like cheating, being lazy, getting complacent, being at the top. So all they were left with is what their own Roman army could guard, which is basically was modern-day Italy. Another reason, the taxes were so high to pay for the military and all these various things that the food costs went up. The taxes were so high for land, nobody wanted to farm anymore. At that point, food was too expensive, and people started to get kind of upset with this whole Roman Empire. They didn't want to stay loyal to them anymore. Also, just like Michael Jackson had some money problems, these guys had money problems going on. Where do you suppose they got most of their wealth when they were conquering lands? Yeah?
The apples.
So similar to how a pirate gets his money by taking things? So they even took the pirate ships for themselves. They got all this money by conquering lands. But do you think they could continue on like that? They could really only get the areas around the Mediterranean Sea. Once they got all this stuff together, they no longer had money coming in. Because do you think they could sell a big Coliseum stadium to someone over here in Russia? No, they weren't making things that they could sell, so they weren't really getting money coming in once they stopped taking things from everyone else. Okay? So let's take a look at our sheets at some of the reasons now that cause these downfalls. You guys got that? What does that say? What does that mean?
It says extra
Okay, this is a result, but this isn't a factor. So what are some of the factors that we talked about?
Traders. Can we put bribing for factories?
Well, they were hiring other people to be their military, like the barbaric tribes. They weren't bribing them; they were hiring them, and they weren't very loyal.
I didn't migration German overconfidence.
Yeah, good.
So it's kind of like how Israel taking over the Jew stuff, but then they got too
After they got too big, they really started to get too ambitious. Okay. All right, guys. What are some of the legacies of the Roman Empire? What are some of the things that we still remember about them today? Yeah. The technology. What's some of the technology? One of you guys kind of mentioned about buildings. What do you use to make buildings?
Stone.
You guys with a C.
Whatever they use.
Cash.
Brick.
Cement. They invented that. They invented cement. How many of you guys
doesn't end in a
know
C.
people around here that work with cement? Yeah? You can thank the Romans for that. They invented cement. Okay, what are some of the other things that we still use today? Yeah?
Aqueducts.
Aqueducts? Yeah?
Government.
The government, exactly. We still have a Senate. We got that idea from the Romans.
The Ark.
Some of the architecture,
Well,
like the Coliseum, the stadiums. Anybody here been to Lambeau Field? The shape of that stadium was based on the Coliseum, okay? Now let's just take a look here at some of the main points here in what led to the fall in terms of our maps. Again, what is this country here?
Egypt.
Egypt. How about over here? How about this one? Greece. Next to Greece?
Italy.
Turkey. Yeah, Italy's here.
Italy.
What about this? It used to be called Persia. Begins with an I.
No, it's
India. Georgia.
Iran.
Oh.
Iran.
And
Right
then
next
isn't
to
right
Iraq.
north of Iran, Georgia, over to the right a little bit?
Yeah.
Like right over.
All right, guys.
So she's there.
So what was this called over here? The Western Roman Empire. This emperor here split it into two. What do you suppose this one was called? The Eastern Roman Empire. So that set forth all these changes. By 476, there was no more Western Roman Empire because the German chieftain came and took over. The eastern part remained. You guys might learn about this later on in the year. That became called the Byzantine Empire, including places like Turkey, and Constantinople was the capital there. That whole thing evolved and changed. It was no longer the Roman Empire. So now let's take a look at some of the traits here